Khalil, and if you're a member of my community, you already know that I love me a good book. I have a little library in our house where I would gladly spend all my days if I could just get paid to read, and also if somebody could just bring me snacks all the time. And I'm a physical book kind of reader. No Kindles or audiobooks for me. No, I prefer to hold my books, and even stranger, to smell them. I read more than 50 books a year, which has most people asking the question, where do you find the time? And my answer is that it's something that I love to do. So it isn't all that hard. Like for some people, they love working out. So it's something they do most days. And since I hate it, I have to force myself to make the time, but not the case with reading. And while reading does make me better and smarter, it's not at all why I do it. For me, it's an escape, a retreat, and it fills me up. My go-to books are usually novels, especially historical novels, and mysteries, especially murder mysteries, because apparently I have a dark side. I fit in the occasional leadership or self-development book, but that's like every fifth to eighth book that I read. And one category that I love, but I often don't tell people about, is rom-coms. Mostly because it feels a little off-brand for me, right? I'm not a big romantic, and I want nothing to do with women being saved or any messaging that having some man come along and choose you somehow suddenly makes you whole or complete or valuable. And don't even get me started on how so many authors write women in their books. You'd think I'd be more likely to ban romance novels than read them, right? But there's this one category that I just love, and it's my go-to choice when I'm having a tough time or I just need a little lightness in my life. And that is those rom-coms, very specifically romantic comedy novels that write clever women who bring far more to the table than just how they look, and also make me laugh so hard that my family or even strangers on a plane think I've officially lost all the marbles as I cackle until tears leak out of my eyes. So, friend, on this episode of This Is Woman's Work, we're going to talk rom-coms with one of the best. Layne is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of more than 36 romantic comedies, including Made in Manhattan, To Sir with Love, and her latest novel, Miranda in Retrograde, which I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of and read it in one day. I devoured it more than I read it. Her books have sold over 1 million copies worldwide, and she's here today to talk to us about why rom-coms speak to our souls and help heal our hearts. So, Lauren, thank you for being our guest and for writing this book that I love. And let me kick off by asking you why you think rom-coms heal our hearts.
Oh man, so I'm the opposite of you. As I was listening to your whole intro, like I've since like my earliest reading days, and I've been an avid reader since I was a kid. Like romance, that's like always called to me. Even Sweet Valley High, and like those kind of like maybe
Oh my
the
God,
ones that
I read
did you
all
read
the
them?
Sweet Valley Highs. I totally did.
Oh man, I'm sure like my parents weren't like thrilled. So like I'd go to the library and they'd be like, here's the classics. And then I'm like, okay, but here's my pile. And it was always, even reading those, it was always like the Ted Elizabeths or, it was the romance. It's always called to me. And then like the more I got into my teens, 20s, like it just increasingly called to me to finally write one. So in terms of why though, I think this is not a groundbreaking bit of news for anyone, but there's so much negativity already in the world. Like there's already like every time I look at the news, every time you talk to someone, there's always something going wrong. There's something that's just meh. Even like I feel like a lot of the stuff that we really see trending on Netflix and all the streaming services, it's true crime and like these really gritty sort of, for lack of a better word, depressing, dark things. And I do occasionally, like I love dark and twisty stuff. I love mysteries as well. But I'm like, gosh, where do you go if you just want a little pick me up? And maybe that just sounds really shallow, but it really just, writing it and reading it, I think it gives women just this little tiny place to escape to where, especially at least the way that I like to write them, like life is just a little bit better. Like, yes, it's a little bit of a fantasy, but I think sometimes we need that reminder to just be like, yes, there is beauty in the world. There is love in the world. Like, like I don't, happily ever after, I know is a cliche phrase, but I'm like, there are happy endings that people, fall in love forever and ever and ever and have these beautiful endings and futures. So yeah, I think it's just, it really is as simple as adding a little happiness to the world. Like that sounds so trite now as I say it out loud.
No, but it's so true because that's exactly when I want to read them, and when it impacts me the most is, as I said, when I'm kind of going through a dark or challenging time, or I'm really struggling with something. A lot of people give the advice to read more self-development books, but that is not at all what I want in those moments. I want a
Hmm.
rom-com. I want something that's going to make me giggle. I want something that's going to make me feel good. I want hope. I want beauty. I
Yep,
want
yep.
the happy ending, maybe for no other reason to remind me that a happy ending is an available option. So,
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I mean, just especially, with the past few years, everything going on, like, sometimes I think we can forget that. Like, it seems like a lot of the stuff coming in every time, like I said, we check the news, it's like, "Oh, well, that's another terrible thing." So yeah, just having that little nugget of goodness is something that I try to throw out into the world.
so I'm curious, when you're writing a rom-com, what are the must have ingredients or the things that you think are essential when you're writing a book like this that will attract the reader and give them this experience that we're talking about?
So for me, it comes down to two things, and this is, I mean, part of it's sort of a hallmark, I think, of the genre, but then also just kind of like my own personal reading preferences. I am all about the witty banner. So from the very, like, as much as possible on the first page, and sometimes it's hard in that intro chapter because you're trying to introduce characters. But yeah, having that kind of like snappy, again, better than real life dialogue, I think is essential. But then the other thing that I like, and this one's it's harder to see maybe, I think, unless you're specifically like used to writing it, but like I love to put in a little bit of longing, and I use that word a lot in terms of what's important to me in writing, because it's creating that little tug that the characters have for each other, even if they don't quite recognize it. And then that creates a corresponding tug in the reader of like, okay, I'm feeling something, like I want these two people to get together. And it's like you want something that's not yet happening. And so that's what keeps the pages turning. So I always say, like, whenever aspiring writers ask, like, oh, like, why is my book not working? And I'm like, guaranteed it probably doesn't have enough conflict. Like, we think we want these people to get together because we do, but the key is doing it like at the very, very end. So like I said, we create that kind of like, oh, like I can't wait. And you feel it in your stomach. I don't know how else to describe it really, but like when it's done well, and I always try to do it well, you feel the tug, the longing.
Your most recent book definitely has both. And I love the better than real life dialogue, because I think that I'm like, why don't I talk like this in my regular life? And why don't I surround myself with people who have this witty banter all the time? I looked at your website and you talk about the different tropes that
Hmm.
exist in rom-coms. And it's funny, as I was reading them, I was like, yeah, okay, this makes so much sense. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on things like fake relationship turns real, or falling in love with your best friend, or my personal favorite, grumpy sunshine, where the positive and upbeat person
Yeah.
meets the introverted grumpy one, which of course speaks to my soul. Tell us a little bit about these tropes and why you think they speak to us.
So first, I'll say I'm actually a little embarrassed to have to even admit this, but for the longest time, I've been writing for over a decade now, and I didn't really know that grumpy sunshine was even a thing until probably like the past few months. And I was like, oh, like I always thought we called it like enemies to lovers or opposites attract. And then the second I heard the name, I'm like, yes, like that is what I'm attracted to, is the grumpy sunshine. So I've been writing it for years, and I didn't even realize. And even this one, Miranda in Retrograde, I actually didn't realize it was grumpy sunshine as I was writing it until the publisher after the fact came up with, like the blurb and the marketing copy. And they're like, oh, a Grumpy Sunshine romance. And I was like, I had no idea I wrote one of those, but sure enough, this is Grumpy Sunshine. But in terms of tropes, they get kind of a bad rap, especially for people that don't in general read romance or like romance. But I actually think they're kind of the key to why we keep coming back, because it's that familiarity. Like, it's the same thing we talked about in terms of like, you want that lightness, you want to feel good, you want that little, that little bit of better than real life fantasy. And everybody has their preference. So like, I love knowing sometimes I am very much in the mood for one of those friends to lovers. Like, I want that type of story. So I actually kind of love the trend that we're seeing in the rom-com world and romance in general, which is really advertising those tropes. And if we go back when I first started writing, it was the opposite. Like, we didn't use tropes, was a dirty word. We weren't supposed to say that. I think we were supposed to like market, our romance or romantic comedies as being like this very unique thing. and they're not necessarily. And I think that's actually, it's a good thing. It's the reason people love the Hallmark Christmas movies. They're all pretty much exactly the same, but that's what they get criticized. I'm like, that's what they want. Like, that's what people are looking for. They want that comfort. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the tropes. And in terms of the ones that you mentioned, especially, my favorite tropes, and it sounds a bit like a cheat, and maybe it is, but I love the ones that require sort of forced proximity. So like anytime there's that fake relationship, like you said, those are probably, I wouldn't say they're the easiest to write necessarily, but when you have these people, if they're pretending to be in a relationship, that means they have to be on the page together. And that is, I will tell you, the hardest thing about a romantic comedy, especially most of mine are set in New York and Manhattan, which is millions of people. Like, what are the chances they're going to bump into each other? Nothing. But if they have to pretend to be in a relationship, or in this case, I do Neighbors a lot too, just because Neighbors makes it easy for, like I said, for them to be on the page together and to have that witty banner. So yeah, tropes on one hand, like I said, they're comforting, but I also love them just from sort of the way that it allows us to tell these love stories sort of within the framework of these familiar ideas.
And I don't know if they feel real to me or if I want them to feel real, but the reality is most of us do meet the people we spend our lives with or that we fall in love with, even yes, romantically, but even outside of that through proximity, right? Like living close
Yeah,
by or working together or being put into a situation together or being in weddings together. I mean, there's just so many things. Now, I don't personally know anybody who's had to fake a relationship
right.
and then
Yeah.
ended up falling in love. But I tell you what, I love the story every time.
Me too.
One of the things that you did so well in Miranda and Retrograde that I really loved and appreciated was writing women. I said this in the intro. I just sometimes hate how people write women, even in mysteries where it's like so focused. Like, I don't really care how this person looks. It's not necessary to the story, but there's so much focus on it.
Hmm.
When you write your characters, maybe specifically women, are there any, I don't know if rules is the right word, or anything that's really important to you to make these women stand out or make them be different and yet appealing?
It's so interesting actually you brought that up about the physical appearance, because that's one thing I think that's changed a little bit since my early days. And this is just, when you're first starting out as a writer, it's pretty common to think of, like a celebrity that you have in mind, like your inspiration for this character. And I did probably do that early on. I think I had Jennifer Aniston. I don't remember who was like, oh, that's my character is Rachel from Friends. But actually the more that I've kind of gotten into this career, the more I write, it's actually pretty important to me to not have a really clear vision of what they look like. And a lot of times I think I've written a couple of books where I won't even put it in. Or there's been times where actually my editor's like, okay, no, you have to say like what color hair she has or like how tall she is. Because, people need some sort of visual. And I'm like, I don't want them to I want them to create their own visual. And also that's not what's important here. So I think like it always, this sounds very vague, but I always kind of start with an essence of the character. If that makes sense. It's sort of like I when I'm writing down my like little character worksheet, which sometimes I do, and sometimes I just wing it, and she gets a little bit inconsistent, and I have to fix her later. But I don't go with the hair color or in terms of what they look like. It's like, okay, who is this person really? And I also really always start with the change, because that's the thing that I think people don't realize they want that in a character. But she needs to be different at the end of the story from the start of the story, and in order to figure that out, you have to know who she is so that you can figure out where she's going. So that's, I don't know if that answers the question or if I'm just rambling here, but it's a matter of taking out, I think, the physical part altogether. Not that they can't have physical chemistry, because that obviously is essential. They have to find each other attractive if you're telling a romance. But yeah, really just getting rid of that altogether and saying, okay, who is she? And how is she going to change on the page? And once I figure that out, that's when they really like unlock for me. And that's when I feel like I can bring them to life a little bit easier.
Yeah, I feel like the two characters in this book, there was obviously a physical chemistry, but it felt more like a connection. Like
Hmm.
they were more attracted to who each other were as opposed to how they looked. I also loved that you went with Miranda being this very smart, intellectual, factual, logical person who then went on a somewhat forced explorations of
Hmm.
something totally different because of and I put in air quotes, failure in her professional life that felt really real. So I'm curious, when romantic comedies get turned into films or shows, how does that work for the author? Is that exciting? Are you involved? Are you not? Do they destroy your book? Like, how does,
That is
I'm
a
curious
fun
about that.
question. Yeah, so I wish I had more like concrete information, but so my experience very much has been there. I don't want to say like we get a ton of interest in all my books, but my agent is always shopping all of my books all the time to film editors and producers. And usually what happens is we will get interest, some of them by multiple producers. And it's just, there's so many moving parts. As I do not envy, say Hollywood, because I don't know the right term, Hollywood as a catch-all for that world. But yeah, usually what happens is they show interest in it, they get a shopping agreement, and then the tricky part is, and they have to go take it around and they have to find a writer, and ideally they would also get a cast member, like a star power name associated with it. So then when they go to the Netflixes or the Amazon Primes of the world, or the big studios, but they need to have all these places or all these pieces in place so that they can really move forward. But in terms of how it is on my end, it really depends. So I've sat across from some producers on Zooms where they basically have told you all the ways that they're going to change your story. And then they say basically, and it is a conversation where they're like, are you okay if we pitch it in this direction? Sometimes I am, because it does make sense for the adaptation. Other times I'm like, nope, you're changing the core of the story. But at least with Miranda, and again, like definitely nothing final, to say, like, fingers are always crossed that we do get something. But actually where the interest has been in Miranda is as a TV show, and the idea of starting each episode with a horoscope, which I think is such an interesting idea. But that was a long conversation in terms of like, how would we take a relatively short book, because my novels in general tend to be on the shorter side. How do we take a short book and try to turn it into a series? And you would have to obviously introduce other characters and other plot threads. So that's a very convoluted way of saying I don't really know, but that's been my experience.
What about rom-coms for men? And let me say it another way. Is my understanding is that most romantic comedies are written by women and read by women, and probably one of the few genres that falls into that category. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
like business books are almost always on the opposite end. I think the last stat I read was something around 80% of business books are being written by men. And I don't know if they would say that they're writing them specifically for men, but I don't think they're, spending a lot of energy trying to think about it from the feminine lens or anything like that. So my question is, do men read rom-coms? And if not, why should they?
So my experience is that they don't, and I will throw in a really big exception though. My husband and I actually co-wrote one together.
I
Um,
love that.
so yeah, and I was like, okay, you have to at least read a couple, and he's read all of mine. So he has kind of an understanding of the genre a little bit, but you could see the shock sort of on everybody's face, men and women, when we tell people this news. I'm like, oh, what's new with you? And we're like, oh, we wrote, this book, Emergency Contact. And they're like, both of you? And they're like, and it's a romance. And it is, it is very much a romantic comedy. And I would say he's a comedian. So that one in particular leans into the comedy side. But at its core, it still does have that the romantic arc. And it's another queer woman, definitely. So that was even kind of, I think, more fun. That's a tangent, but that was even more fun to dive into. But in terms of why should they? That's actually a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and I'm sure most romance authors and readers would share this gripe. So much of the criticism we get from the fluffy, and I'm putting fluffy in air quotes here, the criticism we get comes from men, and yet if you talk to them like, well, have you ever read one? They haven't. So it's just like this knee-jerk reaction they have of bashing this thing that they've never even given a chance. And I'm not quite sure where that comes from, or maybe I do, and maybe it's the patriarch and all of those things. But in terms of why they should, it really is. I mean, I think men as much as women can use that same escape that we talked about earlier, and that reminder that, oh, things can be nicer and more pleasant than sometimes we remember. And reading those books, I think can nudge the men in the right direction as well.
Agreed. I would reiterate the escapism part of it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I watch romantic comedies with my husband, and some of them he doesn't like as much as I do, but for the most part, I think we're on the same page, especially when they're funny.
Yep.
If people are listening who have maybe always wanted to write their own book or have a idea, any advice for the writers or potential writers listening in about how to write a book?
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, I could go on forever. The first thing I would say, especially if you're looking at romance or romantic comedy, and I touched on this before, is make sure that it has conflict, because a lot of what I see aspiring writers is they think they have a great idea, and it is great, but they actually just have the premise. It's how these two people meet, or it's maybe how the story ends, or kind of like how there's that forced proximity element. They have that part figured out, but what you always need, and I didn't realize this for the longest time until I kept trying to write. I'm like, why is this so hard? You have to have something keeping them apart. And that's so counterintuitive when we're thinking about romance, because it is about two people falling in love. But in order to write a book that's interesting, that people turn pages, you have to know why they can't be together right now. So that's the number one thing I always suggest, is because, like I said, it is counterintuitive. Yeah, figure out how they fall in love, but figure out why they can't fall in love until the very last chapter. So that's kind of my starting point. And then the other thing, this is a tossed around a lot in terms of writing advice, but it's write what you want to see on the shelf. And that's really how I started when I'm like, okay, I want to write a book. It came down to, okay, what sort of book do I love to read? And I love a Mr. Darcy type hero. So that probably comes to that grumpy sunshine thing again. Like, I love myself a Mr. Darcy type of hero. So I'm like, well, that's what I'm gonna write. And then also at the time, this was many years ago, there weren't a lot of sort of like city romances. It was a lot of small town that was popular at the time. So I'm like, okay, like I can't find a Mr. Darcy hero set in a city, so I'll start there. And that was, yeah, really kind of trusting my own reading instincts, I think, has led me to be a better writer.
Great advice. My last question is, what rom-com books are you reading? And do you like even reading books in your same genre, or like they always talk about the electrician who doesn't work on their own house because it's, you do that all day long. So my question is, do you read it? And if so, who are some of your favorites?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I have not been reading a lot, I think, in the past few years. And when I first started my career, absolutely, I still had all of my favorite authors. And I still do. Like, I still buy their books to support them, but it's sort of twofold. One, I don't like to read anyone who's what we call writing voice. Someone who has the same style as me. I try to stay away from those as much as possible, especially as I'm gearing up for a new project, because I notice pulling little elements of their style into my own. So sometimes it is just like, no, I need to keep, my style, my voice pure, and I don't want to copy anyone, even unintentionally. And then also, I don't know if I don't want to say that there's so many of them feel the same to me now, but I'm always on the lookout for one that feels really fresh. So that's kind of like, I'm starting to get increasingly picky. And there's one, it's Emma of 83rd Street. And gosh, I'm totally forgetting the two authors' names. They're lovely, but that was one, and it was an Emma retelling, which you think, well, that's not that fresh if it's a retelling, but something about it it felt like you hadn't read it before. It felt like almost like Clueless. I don't know if you watched that. There's something about Clueless that felt so fresh, that had sort of that same idea, set for a different age group. So yeah, the short version is no, I don't really read them that much, and I wish that I did, but increasingly it feels like I need to. Yeah, the electrician example, I had never thought of that, but that's perfect. That's exactly sort of, I think, what I'm experiencing lately.
Yeah, completely makes sense. This is not a question, but just one of my favorite parts of your book, and how I knew I was going to love it, because it's like, I don't know, in the first several pages, but you talked about comfort cheese. Making your way through a variety of cheese types can help speed up the stages of grief, is what it says. And you literally spoke to my heart, because cheese is my love language, and comfort cheese should very much be a hashtag and a thing, and something we all rally around. So thank you for giving me the phrase of comfort cheese.
Oh, I love it. That's one I never, like, it's kind of, sometimes I kind of know ahead of time what I'm going to write. And that one, because I'm a big cheese fan myself. That one I just found myself, I'm like, oh, this is a great idea. I got to put this in here. So yeah, comfort cheese. I think we should make it a thing. It'll be our mission.
We should build a business around it. I mean, come on. Lauren, thank you so much. I need to tell people to go to laurenlayne.com. You can find all of her many, many books, plus the information about the tropes, which I found really interesting, and then some books that fall into those categories. And no matter what, go to Amazon or your local bookstore or whatever it is you buy books, and get Miranda in Retrograde, and then tell me what you think, because I freaking loved it. Lauren, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Here's the thing about rom-coms, or really anything that brings you joy. They remind us that life doesn't always have to be so serious. We get to choose what we let in, what we make time for, and how we nourish our souls. Whether it's a clever but messy woman who makes you laugh, a story that offers a little escape from your never-ending to-do list, or a moment that just makes you feel good, don't underestimate the power of bringing and allowing some lightness in your life. So go ahead. Embrace what makes you happy, even if it's a little off-brand, even if it's just for you, maybe especially if it's just for you. Because in a world that often demands so much from us, we deserve to find joy in the simple, unexpected places. Finding joy and laughing like a lunatic are most definitely woman's work.